All right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm Connor, and today I will be your chauffeur as we go on this journey through Drive My Car. And I'm here with Katya.
Hello.
And as always with Calvin.
Hey.
And so this film won Best International Film, and I maybe have some gripes about it because I feel like we saw a couple really good an Icelandic film called Lamb, and
It just got outright snubbed.
and I feel like part of that is like the time it came out in the year. It was like earlier on, so.
No, it was October.
Was it?
Yeah.
All right, I trust you. But it was one of my favorite movies of 2021, and then we saw The Worst Person in the World, which is a Norwegian film, and Katya, you were there for that one too. Mm-hmm. And I think I loved it. I thought it was this really great, authentic film, but Drive My Car ended up winning. And Calvin, I kind of wanted you to give the synopsis on it, because out of all of us, you're the one who's going to do it the most justice.
I think I'm the one that likes it the most, so I might be...
I certainly think that's true.
Drive My Car is fascinating. It's a very narrow view of a specific genre of cinema, I think. But the basic idea of the story is that there's this guy that has a complicated relationship with his wife. She ultimately passes, and then, I mean, that's 40 minutes into the film. She passes away.
Isn't that wild that the credits appear?
Yeah,
40 minutes into the movie. I
40
thought that
minutes
was nuts.
Yeah, and then so the last 2 hours and 20 minutes are about him directing one of his plays. The conflicts with reoccurring characters from his past, and then this relationship that he forms with a girl who's been contracted to drive him by the production company that's putting on his play because of an issue he has with his eyesight. They don't want him getting in a car crash, so
right.
Just to protect their liabilities, they hire this girl, and they ultimately learn that they have a lot more in common, and how they overcome their past is basically the whole point of the movie.
Right. And you did not misspeak. After you get to the credits 40 minutes in, there is another 2 hours and 20 minutes of this film. You did not misspeak. This is honestly, it's listed at 2 hours and 59 minutes. And I'm like, add another minute, you coward.
Yeah.
Make it 3. Listed as 3. But it's directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi, and it's based off of a short story by Haruki Murakami. And it had a budget of 1.3 million, so I mean, this is like really modest, and it made 11. And again, it's gotten all this acclaim because it won an Oscar. And
I mean, just because it's good, it didn't need an Oscar, a pity international feature Oscar to be told that it was good.
We will dive more into my opinion on this film.
I needed to be told.
Yes. So one of the concerns I had going into this is, I knew the runtime, and I think it's hard to keep an audience engaged if you're just telling a human drama, and there's no surreal moments, there's no fantasy involved. You're just trying to experience someone's life, and my concerns, I think, were well founded. I found this movie to be really boring, and it's not that it's not well made, and I think it's a story that got its point across, but I just think it's incredibly long for essentially, I think, a story about closure. And there's plenty of movies out about closure. If I wanted to watch that, I would just watch a ghost story. But that was kind of my issue with going into this. I'm not saying every movie needs to be Lord of the Rings or Avengers and have fantastic elements to it, but I just think it's going to be tough to stay engaged in a movie that's just human drama. So, did the runtime affect you guys at all? And does it affect recommending this movie?
I think I'm stuck in the middle between you and Calvin. I thought I was very opposed to the positive view of the movie until I talked to you, Connor. But
yeah, you're going to be the child in the middle of a divorce for the next hour.
So I think the length for me was the biggest thing. It took me a long time to get through it, especially when I got to the credits. Like I paused it there, and then I think I didn't finish till the next day. So
were you like, thank God it's over?
Yeah. For me, it was like a 24-hour movie.
Right.
Because that's how long it took to watch it. But yeah, so on reflection, I have a lot more appreciation for some of those longer scenes and some of the space that they give the characters to kind of, make this change. And I think that it says a lot without saying, like, physically saying a lot as the characters. The movie ends up saying a lot, which we can talk about later. So I don't know. Yeah, the length definitely gave me a little trouble in finishing it and in forming a cohesive and experience at the end and for enjoying it while I was watching it.
Right.
And also just working up like the nerve to, I got to watch a movie.
Yeah.
Like I got home from work and I was like, man, I got to get everything together because I got to start by 6. I think even for working yourself up to watch this movie, the runtime is intimidating. I mean, I got home, at 5 from work, and I was like, okay, well, this is a long movie. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff in it, and I have 2 weeks to watch it. And if I want to watch it twice, I gotta do it early. So it was like the Monday after our last recording. I was like, I'm just gonna throw it on. It took me 4 hours to watch because I was I had to get snacks. I had to pee every now and then. It's one of those movies.
I definitely I stay up pretty late, and it was maybe like 9 o'clock, and I was like, you know what, I haven't watched this yet. We have to record on it. I was like, I'll throw on, drive my car, and then I saw the runtime 3 hours. So I was like, I'll watch Belfast instead. 90-minute movie. So you are right. There's like I don't usually look up the runtimes before because I don't want that to affect how I watch it, but it's hard when it's on like a streaming service and it just lists it right there, and it definitely changed the way I was like, oh no, okay, I need to actually set a time for this and to be ready to go and watch it. And it's bad. It shouldn't affect my opinion on it, but I do think knowing the runtime changed how I thought about this movie and how I was going to go about watching it and needing to take notes in between, and which is unfortunate. But I am going to complain about the runtime of this movie.
Yeah, but so also part of like why this doesn't bother me is that I have just seen a glut of films that are so much slower than this. It's not that this movie is interesting because those movies are so much worse. I don't think that this movie is necessarily entertaining or very engaging. It's something that you need to rewatch several times to really get all of the thematic elements and all of the symbols that they're talking about. But I come with a different appreciation for these types of movies because, like I was saying, there's this very particular idea of cinema like this, where it's this meditation, where it's this reflection on characters and decisions and states of being, which is, I think the 3-hour runtime is sufficient. I think you need the whole thing. I think you could have made it more succinct, but it also takes away from the fact of like what these characters are going through. Like time is such a big deal here, and the way they represent it doesn't necessarily fit in thematically, but it's like a texture thing. It adds more to your experience of these characters.
So we had talked about it before recording. I thought all the most important scenes take place in the car. And I think you could have cut everything out in between and you could have gotten the same message across. And one thing that you had mentioned is like, well, I think kind of the point is that it's supposed to be something we linger in. It's supposed to be long because we're supposed to experience what this character is going through. It's like this long drug out time where he has to be alone with his feelings and eventually confront them. And so I can appreciate filmmaking in that way. If it's going to be long and like serve a purpose, I can appreciate it more for that. So while I will criticize it, I do get it. In terms of like building your story, you need to make it long. We need to linger on this because that's what your character is going through.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that all of the most important scenes are in the car. I think that a lot of the culmination of a lot of the themes do happen in the car.
Right.
But you need all of the things before that precede that to build to that. I really want to talk. I think I didn't really understand how his wife tied into a lot of things, like the stories that she told. Those are so much more important than I originally thought. I kind of thought of this movie as like a 2-hour and 20-minute film with a 40-minute flashback.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
But I don't think it is, because the thing is, you need to understand the context of their relationship. And then the stories on top. You could talk about the stories, but you just don't get the same sense of their relationship without showing it physically. Okay. So that's why this movie needs to be 3 hours and why that whole 40 minutes is so necessary.
And why they can't do flashbacks. You get to see their actual real you get to see her in real life.
Yeah,
You're not just seeing him, this melodramatic, oh, my wife's dead. This is my memory of her.
Yeah. This isn't a CW show. Like, this is art.
You said it's like not melodramatic. I would describe it as very melodramatic.
I just meant the flashback. Okay. Adding the flashbacks in, I think, would make it even more that way.
We'll get into some of the reasons I think it is just a really well-written soap opera. But before that, we talked about this being based on a short story, and Katya, you did some research on it, and I think it's always good to get some like background on like where's this story coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So think the main story that's built on is by the same title, Drive My Car, by Murakami, and then it pulls from a few other stories in that same collection to kind of flesh out the rest of it. And I did find it interesting because Murakami explicitly stated he didn't think that, books should really be adapted into movies, or short stories didn't need to be filmed, that books were good as books and they say all they need to say. So it would be interesting to talk to that later about how this really did add a lot more nuance and teach us, or maybe show us more through having it in the medium of film. But the essential story of the Drive My Car is really that scene between Kafuku and Koji at the bar, where they're talking to each other. They're not really explicitly saying that they know what's going on, what happened with Oto. Like, it's never, Koji's never really confronted with that actuality of what happened. We just see them talking and starting to maybe understand each other. So the short story is very much like that. It's two middle-aged men meeting in a bar for months and forming this relationship when in the background the one man had a wife who died of cancer, and he's fairly certain this other man had an affair with her, a relationship with her outside of their marriage. And it's never explicitly said. They just keep talking and they slowly start to form a friendship, and they at some point understand each other. And it kind of culminates in the one man trying to push the other, maybe not push him, but the other man almost says what happened, but instead he talks about how you can't really know another person by trying to look into them constantly. Like, you'll never find an understanding there. You just have to look deep within inside yourself, and that's where you're going to get the answers that you're looking for. So I think that really sets up the whole frame of the movie. That is what Kafuku has to do.
Yeah, I think that theme of the movie is portrayed really well. I mean, there's the scene in the car where they're talking about the story that Oto is come up with, and Koji knows like the ending. Like you said, explaining like you can't really know the other person. All you can do is kind of self-reflect and know your own heart. And so I think like that theme of the movie, it's a through line through the book that is, I think, portrayed well in the film. I did also read an article that the writer said that he's like, movies are fair game. He's like, it's okay that, it's changed and adapted and everything. But
yeah.
I like that, like that piece of the movie, or that piece of the book, which is the core theme, carries into the movie. I think that makes a lot of sense. So you had mentioned the story kind of revolves around this infidelity of Oto. And what did you guys think of the reveal that Kafuki has known the whole time that his wife has been cheating on him? It's assumed it's with actors from the dramas that she's written. I think the way it's shown to the audience is this is him initially finding out. It's kind of this trope, and it made me roll my eyes that someone has a plan, plans get canceled, they end up coming back home, and then they catch their significant other with another partner. And it's really simple in a way, but it sets up the story really well. And you find out later that this is something that he's known for, years, or it's been going on for a while. Did it make you guys go back and look at scenes earlier in the movie once that reveal is made known that this isn't the first time he saw it? He's known for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I was so tense. Like, that's what I thought the whole movie was about for the first half. I was just waiting for him to say something to somebody. And it just seemed like he wasn't admitting it. It seemed like it was all about him not wanting to admit this to himself. But then when you realize it's been happening for years and he's just never wanted to confront her, he's liked what they have and he's afraid of losing it.
Yeah, he says he's worried about it affecting the balance of their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe he thinks she might leave if he knows, or it wouldn't work anymore as well. So knowing that and then having him lose her means, it just feels like it means so much more, because it's not just about him wanting to know the truth behind why she did it. It's like him wanting to know everything about her at this point. It makes all those scenes that they had, for me, feel more important, because those are the honest moments that he had with her, and the moments when they were really creative together and that work was flowing. And I think that did kind of hurt me later when I realized, she was telling these stories. It didn't have anything to do with him. It was all with the orgasm and the sex was really the main part of it.
Right.
But he did help and they did collaborate.
Yeah, going back, like those stories actually make a whole lot more sense to me. They work in a thematic way that felt very loose and untied the first time through. Going back through, you realize that story of the intruder is something that it's about him. It's about Kafuku actually finding her. That security camera getting added afterwards, and that's the only thing in the world that had changed to indicate that she had committed the act that she had done, that she was no longer this lamprey, not hurting anyone, that she had become a different person. And that is actually mirrored in the second time that they have sex, Kafuku and Noto, after he discovers her with Koji. She looks at that mirror and realizes that you can see straight into the foyer.
Right.
And that right there is why she decides that they need to talk when he leaves, is because she has seen the tangible evidence of her actions and how it has actually changed the world. That's why this movie needs to be 3 hours. Those first 40 minutes are so important to set up the thematic tension of that story later on in the car. That's why that performance is so gripping, is because those stories had been explained to him in such a way, in such an intimate setting, that when Koji tells him one that had continued, one that it was only a bite of what Kafuku had experienced. Koji got the whole thing, and to basically shove that in his face, like, no, your wife's infidelity is much bigger and much more painful than you're actually thinking, because
Right.
here's something so intimate that you thought was only yours, but there are more intimate moments that she's had with other men.
The director had the way you film inside a car. You're going to have a camera in the seat next to the actor, and so while it's edited together to make it seem like they're both in the car, they're not actually during filming. And so he actually had the other actor stand outside the car. That way it felt like they were still working together. I think it's kind of an interesting way to pull off emotion and keep the actor on target for what's going on. I think that's an interesting way to do it, because I think this movie is really melodramatic with all of the way the dialogue is delivered, and it's a lot of monologues. But I do like the idea of it's still a conversation between two people, and being able to pull that off in a way by just having the other actor near the car. That way it feels like you're interacting with something besides a camera. I can appreciate that technique and that style of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of the important relationships and conversations do happen in the car. So that would be so weird to have to film it without the person actually there.
It is, yeah. It's just an interesting thing to be from a filmmaking standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's edited, you just think this is a conversation between two people,
Yeah.
but then realizing that is not, it's not feasible to film that way. So to have a little more background on it, it makes me appreciate the actors a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to move on to after Oto's death. Kafuku is going to direct a play, and it involves actors from different backgrounds, different languages, and it's really just his focus is to have them just interact with the text, because you're not going to be able to pick up on cues from other actors because they don't understand each other. I mean, you have someone who speaks Mandarin, you have people who speak Japanese, someone is using Korean Sign Language, and I think that's a really interesting idea on its own. And the fact that it's an element in this movie, I think, makes it more intriguing. But I just genuinely like the idea of what is going to be the method? How are you going to act going through this, and how are these characters going to play off each other in this story? And so, what did you guys think of that being kind of your next driving plot point? Is this new play that's going to be carried out?
The play made everything. I don't know. At some points, the play felt too much. It felt like there was so much going on. Now you have the play, you're going in and out of it. There's really not a lot of dialogue between the characters outside of the play either for a long time. So everything you're getting is all of these people speaking in different languages, not really understanding each other, not really understanding the text yet, not understanding their director. So in relation to the movie, I found that pretty interesting, because they're kind of being forced to grapple with how do I find the truth in something I don't really understand, and also all the ways that the language and the way we're communicating with each other is getting in the way of us understanding these things, but also at the same time how important these things are simultaneously, because he keeps saying that, you're going to be pulled out by the text, the true you is going to come out, and just seeing how each actor either comes alive with that, the girl the nonverbal one, Liu Na, is that her? How she really comes alive with it, where oppositely, Koji's really, really scared to do that because he thinks he doesn't have anything inside of him. So all of these different people trying to find their own truth through the play is really cool. But it is also it can be confusing at times. It can feel like a lot.
Yeah, and I agree with it a lot. I think it is a lot. I think in some places it's really on the nose. Like when he's reading lines in his car, which I think is just a fascinating idea to include in this movie. How he talks about the woman's infidelity, like, or is she faithful, and that question of that character, and it being a reflection of his own ideas about his own wife. That she is both at the same time faithful and cheats on him. There's no question of her infidelity. I think is so interesting because it's not a monologue. If it's a story that the main character has created and then we see all of these lines coming from other people, I love the idea that that text is coming alive and it's coming out of other people, but through the medium of his own interpretation. And that's why the play is such a big deal for him, why he can't play it anymore. It's because he has all of these things inside of him that he won't confront, that the text does pull all of those things out and is really trying. And for someone that is ignoring significant parts of themselves, of pain and guilt and shame, you can't put yourself into the play. And I love that how here it's the play as an expression of him. And Koji talks about how both Oto and Kafuku are doing the same thing. They're paying attention to details in the things that they write. And those stories being so Oto's stories about the lamprey and about the intruder being so important thematically here. And then in another vein, this play being so important to the themes of the movie. And that all of these other characters aren't really characters, they're ideas that he has about his own inner conflict.
So we're talking about these actors and these table reads and everything they're going through. I wondered, how relatable does this movie feel to you guys? Because to me, I don't draw a lot from it because I'm not an actor. I don't do table reads, and again, I've said that I think the most important parts of the movie take place outside the acting and outside the play. Were you able to walk away from this movie feeling anything, or empathizing, or sympathizing with these characters and the idea of like pain and loss and confronting that and then moving on from it?
Sort of.
Right.
So in terms of the play, I did a lot of theater all the way through college. So the table reads, the plotting, or the blocking, and trying to figure out what your director wants and really not getting it until all of a sudden you get it. Like, I really relate with that.
I love, who is it, Janice Chang? Mm-hmm. And she is having a lot of trouble grasping like what the director wants. And she's like, can you just tell me what I'm doing well or what I'm doing wrong? And she's like, and he just keeps replying back like, well, what do you think? What do you think worked? She's like, I want to know what you think. That way I can change it. But that's not the point. The point is to, like he said, interact with the text and have it draw out yourself. Mm-hmm. So I did like that kind of conflict between the actors and the director. Is like, it's not about understanding what the director wants. It's about understanding what the text is supposed to make you feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, bringing out your truth. I mean, that's like all of it. So I don't know. It's hard to say that the play wasn't super obvious because it is about this guy, everyone questioning the meaning of life and have they wasted their life and what are they doing? And then that's what is happening in the movie, basically. So yeah, I liked all of the interactions with the actors. That part did make it feel more relatable. It made me feel like I knew a lot more about the main character and what he was going through. But in the end, it felt like both of their situations, both Misaki and Kafuku, I had some understanding and some feeling, but their situations just seemed so specific and complicated. And I get the idea of moving on from grief and loss. But yeah, it didn't feel like this is how you do it. And maybe that's important.
I like that you said it was specific. That is something I had mentioned to Calvin before we started recording, is that we watched Turning Red. Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned in that, I didn't go through those specific situations, but I felt relatable in a way because I've been through part of them. Like I had been a teenager growing up with strife between me and my parents and stuff like that. So it felt like it was digestible enough and I could pull something from it. But I agree with you. This felt like a very specific story, and it's going to impact people who went through that specific situation in a more complete way than it will to just like a general audience.
Yeah, and so I kind of disagree. I think that the big part of is the fact that you're trying to connect all of these thematic threads the whole movie, that there's nothing really emotional until the end. And if you're still struggling to put all of the pieces together, it's not going to land. But the one line that really got me, especially on the second time, is where he finally realizes that he did want to confront Odo. He didn't want to lose her. And he just says, I just want to see Odo. And he goes on like, I want to yell at her. I want to berate her. I want to tell her how she's really hurt me. And the pain of not being able to go back and do something that's forever lost, that to me really hit home, because that is universal. It's hard to put that piece in this puzzle that's so massive at the same time. It feels like there's a lot of missing pieces when you get to that point the first time through. The second time through, it really is. It all breaks down about how all of the lines he's reading are thoughts. All of the stories from Odo are allegories for their own life. How even Misaki's story too, about her mom being buried by the rubble and her killing her because she didn't rescue her, how that's reflected there too. It's all of that being seen in these other mediums, through these other people, these other stories, and just finally giving him clarity and peace. And I think that's the biggest thing about this movie for me, is that there's this duality in everyone, parts that we section off from other parts of ourselves, and we think of it being like because of other people. He can't see everything that's in Odo, so he has these two selves where he holds the twin idea of her being a lovely, wonderful wife who loves him, they're great partners, and this person that cheated on him, and he can't reconcile them. So rather than confronting it, he just basically buries it in this hole under an avalanche.
Right.
And that hits me so much harder the second time through, because I see how we got to this point. The first time through, it's not very, very well made. It's just, you really just kind of have to sit and soak up some of these elements, and then the next time through, you're like, oh. So, and that's this brand of cinema. That's kind of
right.
That's kind of the thing. It's like I got reminded of this Taiwanese film that came out 2 years ago called Days, and oh my gosh, if you didn't like this, I have nothing to tell you about Days, because
Days is going to end up being a podcast that we do later, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, it'll take days to watch it.
Days or days?
Days. Yeah, exactly.
Still didn't answer the question.
Yeah. But the first scene is the first shot. It's 7 minutes long of a guy just staring out a window, and you're just looking at him.
Oh boy.
And he doesn't say anything. Every now and then he kind of sighs. And about halfway through that shot, you're like, oh God,
what have I gotten myself into?
So this is moving
Compared
at a
to
lightning
that,
pace.
it's great.
It's cut up in a lot of ways that make this very engaging.
So I like that you brought that up, because I think you're going to see a division in this podcast. You're going to bring a lot more of your film background and your education into this, and I'm going to go into it, and I think Katya too, is just like kind of your average viewer. And I think I've watched a lot of interesting and non-mainstream films since we started doing this. And even still, I was like, this is so boring. Like, we've watched some, I think for an average audience, you would call them like experimental or different. But for you,
I wouldn't even call any of the things even close to experimental or avant-garde.
Yeah, for you, yeah.
Yeah, well, even to the definition of the terms.
Okay.
But I know what you
From
mean.
the lay people, Calvin.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think, we're going to have these juxtaposed opinions going throughout this. And so I like that you're bringing that into it, and I'm certainly going to bring forth why I think you're wrong about it.
I love it, yeah, because I think I think that's what makes this movie so great, and why I think this is so much better than even Everything Everywhere All at Once, is because what makes cinema, a good piece of cinema, so great is the fact that you can have really deep conversations after multiple viewings, and they just sit with you. And I don't think that we're going to have like a super interesting conversation about everything everywhere all at once. I think there are cool things to talk about, but I think it's on the same level of Belfast in terms of like its structure. It's a family drama with some other elements to make it more fun and to give clarity and context for what's going on. But at the same point, it's not a deep movie thematically. I think that's what's always going to hold that movie back for me, is the fact that it's not very philosophically minded. Whereas Drive My Car is. That's what cinema is to me, is like it's these weird ways of being and just sitting in them for 3 hours.
Right.
I was riveted this morning when I got up at 6 o'clock to watch it for a second time.
But no, I'm glad you said
yeah.
that, because I had texted you, and because you had said like Drive My Car is like wonderful and you really liked it, and I
had high hopes that you would actually like it too.
I texted you back. I was like, I did not care for this movie. And I also had said, like, it's good that we feel this way because we've been agreeing way too often. So I like that it's a movie with some controversy between us.
Yeah. And it makes it, I think it does say something to what art is supposed to be. Not the movie itself, but the idea of the movie, that art has all this power, and it's really part of what's keeping all of them alive to some extent. So that we can watch this movie and really like not enjoy watching it, but then talk about it. Like, that's been the most interesting part for me, is learning more about it, not
Right.
necessarily watching it the first time.
Yeah, even as an allegorical function of the play here, there's the meta-analysis of the art giving him clarity on his life, as it is a piece of art contained within art for us. That sounds a little pretentious inceptionism stuff, but I think that's really the biggest thing here, is how art and stories can give you clarity on your own life when they pull out these things that are buried inside of you, and when you resonate with a character in such a way that it says, oh, that's me, that's why I feel this. This, I don't think we experience this like we did, like with like me and Jaden did with Midsummer, because that's just one of those movies.
Right.
That's the express intent of that. Whereas here, there's another layer of it and another level down, and that's, I think, why it's a little bit harder to connect with.
So I want to talk about Misaki. We haven't really addressed her yet, and this is what I mentioned kind of in my first impression, is like it's kind of an odd couple. She's really young, and she ends up becoming his driver. And as the story progresses, it's kind of revealed that they're both going through like similar pain and a lack of closure. And I like how Kafka is put in this really vulnerable place by having to listen to these tapes in front of her. It used to be something that was really intimate for him, and he did on his own, on his drive, and that's why he wants to be like an hour away. That way he can go through this process like his own method. And I think introducing a driver into that, it, like I said, it puts him in this vulnerable place, and it allows them to grow closer to each other. It's really disarming that he has to go through this with her. And like I said, we end up building to the point where you find out they have a lot more in common than you originally thought. And I wonder, what do you guys think about kind of the reveal later on that Misaki feels that she's killed her mother in the aftermath of this landslide, and Kafka also feels that he's killed his wife by not having this confrontation and this having this conversation that he was kind of dreading. How did those stories pair together, and do you like this kind of odd couple and the way their relationship develops?
Yeah, I think they're interesting in that the idea is, I feel like they're both clear examples of people that should not feel shame or guilt over this action, but they're racked with it for whatever reason. She's not the one that caused the landslide, but she feels like she didn't save her. And he also feels like he killed Otto because he didn't want confrontation, because he didn't want to lose her. And then ironically, the reason that he loses her is because he avoided the confrontation and she died.
I don't think she died because they didn't have the conversation.
I think there's the idea that if he had gotten home afterward,
right,
she might have been gotten to the hospital or whatever.
In a narrative sense. It's not necessarily...
Oh my God, I'm so stupid. That makes so much sense. I struggled with the line where he was like, I killed my wife. Like the brain hemorrhage was his fault. That makes so much more sense, is that if he had just been home, then he could have he could have been there to, like you said, get her to the hospital. Or okay, I struggled with that line because I was not understanding why he felt so much guilt over it. Thank you for clarifying that. That makes that will knock this movie up another point, because
Probably.
I struggled to understand why he felt so much guilt and he felt responsible for her death. But that makes so much more sense. Thank you for saying that.
You probably would have caught it on your second viewing.
How come? I couldn't wake up at 6 o'clock to see this with you. I'm sorry.
I was done before anyone even woke up.
We had a late night.
I had a lot of coffee too, though. I mean, to be fair, I needed it for this movie.
Right. Oh, but yeah. Speaking more on like this couple, and I really liked the all the background you get on Misaki, and like her telling her own story, and like the like genuine interest that's showed in it. And I love all the scenes where they're like, you don't ever see him smoking with other characters; it's only with her. And I like that as like just kind of a tie-in to show like this is their time together, and this is like them having an understanding with each other and a common ground between them. And it's just like a visual way of showing that like this is something that they do together.
Yeah. Even though they still are both very much kind of always staying in their own little reveries, they're always kind of separated. And I also really appreciate that it was never, because there was a moment when he said, you know, she's such a good driver, she's so smooth. And when you compare that with how he felt about his wife's driving, you might get a sense of, oh, maybe there's something more than friendship that could happen here. But I like that that's never on the table. They're always friends. It's never like a romance. They make a clear age comparison between her being 23 and his dead daughter would have been 23 at this time, which I think was then even more like, oh, there's something else. This is more of a daughter friend inner voice and something that's going on.
I said this is a well-written soap opera. It would have become full-blown soap opera if this becomes like a romance between the two. So I'm glad that was
and
avoided.
Then she was his daughter.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah, exactly. And he was her father. Yeah, he was the missing father all along.
I could just imagine these like striking music with close zoom-ins on their faces when they come to the realization.
Yeah.
That's a terrible version
Their
of this
face is
movie.
doing nothing, just,
Right.
just staring.
But I think what's so great about that too is it changes the car, the entire dynamic of what the car means thematically too. It's not bringing these characters together for romantic purposes. What it's doing then is he has such an idea of how his life is and how he goes about it. To have to give that up to someone else who he doesn't know, doesn't trust.
Oh, sorry, I just had a realization. So she's kind of like the security camera as well in his life, in a way, because she's the thing that changes.
I think that's a good way of seeing it too. Yeah, because I mean, you could make that statement because like here, this is the daughter that I could have had. My life could have looked differently if she was in it. I suppose that's a really good way of looking at it. And then that makes that scene where where he decides to finally sit in the passenger seat and not the back row, and that moment of connection and relatability. Like I could have had a daughter who smoked just like me, and we just got along. And there are lines where it just in Uncle Vanya where he talks about I wasted 25 years of my life with you, and I feel like that's him talking to Oto every time. And so the idea that here, this is what you could have actually gotten out of it. And to see that, I think that's the clarity that he gets. So it's all of these different stories coming together with this one real moment with someone. I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
No, and I like that you brought up him changing seats in the car too, because I thought that was like a really subtle way to build up his growth in trust and that building of the relationship. Initially, he starts in the back seat on the passenger side, and then eventually he moves a little bit closer and he's directly behind her. And then, like you said, eventually he moves to the front seat and they're smoking together. I think it's just a really neat little subtle way to just show how that relationship has been progressing. And there's other like little neat hints at it as well. Like he tells Misaki like, "Hey, you can stay in the car. It's cold out. Like I don't. If you're going to be waiting on me, I don't want it to be like I don't want you to struggle through this." And then later she's invited into a dinner, even though she's fine with waiting in the car. And I just think there's a lot of like really non-overt ways that they build this relationship and how it becomes like very disarming and it becomes very honest relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, and it always seems like they're both on the same page. Because even from the beginning, she automatically assumes he wants to sit in that seat.
Right.
Unless he'd prefer to sit up front. So I think that sets it up as, oh, when, you will prefer this. Maybe. Someday.
Yeah, and she has a clear respect for what the car is for him. And I think that is why it's so easy for him to get to this point where he feels disarmed, is because she saw him inside and out before they had even ever met. I think that's what's implied by her standing outside of the car when he first gets there is, this is, I get what you are. I could see how much care and detail you put into just taking care of this weird old car that plays cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And then moving that into a genuine connection that she isn't trying to force, but she's there if he wants it to be.
So you mentioned the car and how important it is, and it plays a big role in the end of the movie. So Misaki goes to a grocery store, and she leaves, and she's the one driving the car now. I want to know, what do you think the ending means? What does it say about her story and Kafuku's story? And did you notice anything interesting when she's driving down the road at the very end?
Well, she's in Korea.
Yeah,
South
she left
Korea.
Japan, right?
Okay.
But is that what was in the
That was
background?
my neat thing, is because it was just jumped out to me right away because they're driving on the other side of the street, so it indicates
yeah.
that she's no longer Japan. She's moved on.
There's a
from it.
sign that's in Korean.
Well,
Also, all of the Hyundais. That's a Korean car.
Okay. You're so smart, Helen. I just thought it was just a really.
They were also always speaking Korean.
I didn't notice.
I
that.
actually didn't know
miss
either.
that.
I wasn't paying attention too closely
I
at
looked
that
it
part.
up afterwards.
I will say that is one thing. I was like, oh, it just immediately jumped out to me. I was like, okay, she's left Japan. Like, it's just a really easy way to show that they're driving the opposite side of the road, and it to me just indicates right away without needing to look it up after. I was like, okay, like that's the progression of her story. That was the interesting thing. I thought I was smart for noticing. Apparently, it was extremely obvious.
One thing I like to think about with the car, her having the car, is the idea of the exchange of tokens.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I love that.
for sure.
And him just relinquishing that control and that part of him, and ultimately, that was something that held him back, tied to a past that he no longer had.
Right.
So to give it her, it really brings him full circle for character development.
Yeah, I essentially just thought of it as it's the culmination of both characters' closure, and I like that you see Kafuku's closure without even having him on screen. The fact that he was able to give up this car and move away from something that was like a remnant of a life that he had with his wife, and to be able to give that away, and it all happens off screen, and you understand like that this is the culmination of that character. I think it's done in a really interesting way. And then for Misaki to leave, and now she can move away from this landslide and the past she's had with her mother. I think it is in the end, it's just a story about closure. But I thought the ending was done really well, and it to just have a car drive down a road and then credits roll, and to understand what the point of this movie was and to execute in that way, I thought it was done really well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it was a good way to close. It does kind of feel like, though, that, yeah, he has moved on. He's given that to her. She's moved on. She's left Japan. But she's also moved on, like, with this, like, very symbolic piece of his past that was pain. I mean, I think it also speaks to that. She's still going to be in this. It's not totally gone, but she is moving forward. And he is moving forward, although maybe he kept the tape. So, but
Yeah, that would have been great. She started listening to that tape like as she's driving down the road.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was a good, concise thing. My most confusing part was I thought she had the dog from the other director's house, because they went to dinner and then she got down immediately and started petting the dog, and it looked very similar. So I was like, is this some sort of weird, like they're all traveling troupe and she's their traveling driver and
She's
she has
collecting
the
trophies
dog?
from the people she's killed.
Yeah, I didn't picture her killing anybody, but that was the only thing confusing to me. I was like, why does she have a dog? Maybe it's just because she loves dogs so much. That's her new friend. Maybe that's her new Sachi little friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you say this movie is about closure. I don't think it is about closure. I think he gets closure. I think the whole point of this movie is the process. Is the process to get to closure and to realize that there are things that are holding you back and holding you down. And if you don't approach them, you don't even understand that you need closure. I think that's the thing, is a lot of these characters don't even think that they need anything until they get it. Like that final shot where the two of them are embraced above the hill, where they both reconcile the idea that the best relationship, Sachi Odo, the loving wife, is also the worst person in their life, the abusive mother and the cheating, lying partner. The fact that those exist in one person, and then how they embrace, and she's the daughter that he never had, and he's the father that she never had, and how they can be things that they both missed out on, and that prevented them. That's what creates the schism, I think, in both of the people that they love, is the fact that another piece of that family unit was missing. And so to get that together, that was such a powerful shot for me as well, not only in emotion, but also in a theme.
Right. I actually want to talk about that scene a little bit. Masaki says that she doesn't think that Odo is genuine, and she does love him, and she is also seeking attention from other men, and she doesn't think that these two things contradict each other, and that she can be both those things at once, and it's not strange to her that Odo is this way. In the context of the movie, does that work for you? And then, like, just personally, does that kind of relationship work for you? I think that one thing that surprised me about the reveal that she has been cheating is throughout the portion of the film that Odo is in it, I was surprised at how genuine and how real her love felt, despite the fact that she has been cheating, because I think there's a different version of this movie, or more mainstream idea of like the cheating wife or whatever, where the love is fake and it's a front. But like, especially like the sex scenes between them, they feel intimate and they feel like there's a lot of genuine love in it. And so I kind of agree with that. She is just this person who can be both things. And I think the movie does a pretty good job of pulling that off. But like, contextually, does it fit the movie? Did it match that theme for you?
I mean, yeah, to me it is. I think that's the thing, is he always decided that part of her was something he just didn't understand, and it was like some other thing than what she really was to him. And I think that's what she makes so clear, is it's just like like for her, it was her mother, it was like a mental disease. Like, she is at the same time Sachi and her mother, just at different times. Those aren't contradictions, they're aspects. And I think that's exactly what she's trying to point out is, she did just cheat on you. She did hurt you in big ways, and you're just not acknowledging it. And I think that's what, I think if there's any clear answer for anything in this movie, it's that's it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that people can be more than one thing at once. But I think Kafuko probably it seems like he also has trouble with this, because he's constantly working with actors. He's working in these plays. He has these roles. Everyone seems, for him, to play their role. Like, that's what she's doing. She's either the loving wife or this other person he doesn't understand. And then his driver is just a driver until she becomes this friend and kind of daughter figure. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense in just saying it simply is all of these things all at once.
Right.
And what are you going to do with it?
This is the real 50 Shades of Grey.
What?
Because there's infinite amounts of nuance.
Yeah. No,
There's only 50.
So there's 50 shades of nuance.
So I want to move now into some of the cinematography, like how the shots that we liked. I think one of the scenes that's portrayed really well, and it explains the growing relationship between Kafuku and Masuki, is the scene where he brings back the moonroof, the sunroof on his car, and they're going to smoke together. And it's something that he told her previously, you can be in the car, just don't smoke in it. And so to finally, their relationship has moved to the point where they can be close enough with each other and share this moment together. So as far as like shot selections go, that's one of my favorites, is just the view of both their hands out of the moonroof. And it's communicating a very intimate moment between the two of them. But Calvin, do you have any other scenes, or like kind of elaborate on the filmmaking? So
there's a few, like I don't think the composition here is really all that complex. This is, again, a very specific type of cinema that's centered around the drama of humans, and it's not huge on the mise en scène. The biggest things being how people embrace and how people are filmed. They're always looking past each other. And I think that is such an interesting thing when you think thematically about how they're not looking at each other. They're experiencing, they're getting cues off of them, but they don't really know them. And the biggest one is actually the second time that Kafuku and Oto are having sex. we see her face, and she looks directly at the camera, and then we cut directly to the mirror. And that, again, that's the shot that I mentioned earlier about that was her security camera. That was so interesting. And so you have a lot of these embraces of these back and forths of we're just looking at one person's face and the back of the head of the one they're embracing until the final scene where they both, Misaki and Kufuku, look at the rubble together. That union of view, I think, is such a subtle way of painting a joining of perspective, an understanding between two people. So while the camera work itself isn't very interesting, I think that the way you craft body positions and blocking is so cool. My favorite shot, though, in the whole film is when Koji gets arrested and he's walking up the stairs after he can change, and he looks back at everyone. And there's just, it's a swirl. Nobody is moving or saying anything. And it is just a swirl of tension, of questions. Is he going to go to jail? Is the play going to go on? What happened? That guy died. Like, how badly? Like, what does this do to his career? What does this do for the whole production company? Because they were worried about the guy that ran over someone with their car, and that's why Kafuku couldn't drive. There's so much said in a moment,
right?
And that is amazing.
I wonder, do you think Koji beat this man and got arrested on purpose to force Kafuku into the role, like this confrontation with his feelings and eventually cathartic experience? Or do you think it's just, like as mentioned earlier, it's just kind of happenstance and it's someone who can't control themselves? Or do you think it was intentional by him to force this character into a role that he didn't want to have?
I don't think that Koji was really thinking about Kafuku at all. I think he was just someone that was already on the verge of giving up on everything, and so he just did whatever he wanted to do. And he probably, it didn't seem like he was very remorseful or very upset to be in jail. I think that was probably a relief for him.
Right.
Like he could stop being in the world. So, but that'd be cool if he was like, this is my redemption.
I don't think it's intentional either, but I think it hits that beat, like you said, of a redemption for him. You know, like he can't do something himself, but he can help someone else confront the pain they're going through.
Confront the body in their house.
Right.
I thought that was so interesting. Like when you think about his monologue about talking about Oto's story, like how do you confront the body in your house? What is the evidence that it was ever even there? And while he had just beat the crap out of somebody, lifeless, to understand like where that monologue was then coming from is very interesting. I think it gives more credence to your theory. I think it's nowhere. I don't think it has a whole lot of weight. I don't think it holds a lot of weight in terms of like he actually went and just to beat that guy up to Kapuku to do it. But like
I don't think that is I don't think it was on purpose.
Right.
I just watching it I was like, oh, I mean, it still operates the same way.
Yeah, it does.
Whether it's intentional or not, it still moves your protagonist to the position where he can have this confront himself and then move past it. But I kind of like the idea of like my own little head canon for this movie is like all along Koji was like having these conversations with him in the bar, in the car, and revealing all these like secrets about his own wife, and it was all moving to the point where he could finally let go of this role and allow the person who was really meant to be there fulfill that.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely it's my own little version of the movie. I don't think it's intentional, but I think it operates in that way.
Yeah, he's just actually chaotic good.
Maybe. Well, it's interesting, that he was chosen for the role in the first place. Like,
I think that
what the goal was.
Yeah, I think that is such a good allegory for it. Like, these two things are present in my mind. I'm not going to have any problem with Koji being here, just like I have no problem with the idea of my wife constantly cheating on me existing in my home. You know, I think he is used to that conflict playing out all the time. That seeing a physical representation of it didn't change him at all. It was no harder for him emotionally or conceptually because it was just something he lived with.
Right.
But I did think like from a narrative standpoint, I was like, well, obviously he's coming back later, but like why?
Right. All right, so I think we're ready to move into final thoughts. Katya, what do you think of this one? And on a scale of 1 to 10 lampreys, where do you put this?
On a scale of lampreys, the viewing experience was at a 3 or 4. But as we've talked about it and I reviewed it, I think I have it at like a 7.8.
Wow, okay.
Just because I feel like there's so much more going on. And I've learned a lot more from talking about it than I did from watching it. So I'll put it high up there.
No, I totally agree with you. My initial score was 3 out of 10. I thought this was so boring and I didn't get anything out of it. I did not care for
1
this.
point for every hour.
Yes. But I liked it. I mean, there were some revelations I had, plot points I had missed, and it defined some of the characters a lot better for me, especially some of the guilt surrounding both of them. Having that gap filled in for me through this conversation helps bump this up. But so I'd still put it at like I'm kind of there with you. I didn't enjoy this movie. I understand more aspects of the story and what makes it valuable, but I still don't know that I'd go and recommend this one. And I'm gonna keep it at a 5 out of 10 lampreys.
5. See, I thought you were ready, Connor. That's why I thought we should do this movie.
This is the next step in my film journey, was to understand why this is a great film. And
Yeah.
I didn't reach that peak for you. I'm sorry. We'll have to try again.
I'm so disappointed. But yeah, this was the film I was most, when I realized that you weren't ready. This was the film I was most interested in talking about today, is because this is one of those movies that is a film that changes your perspective on what the medium is and what the medium does. Like, I don't think I think I agree. Like, my experience of watching this movie is below what the discussion is. The discussion, I'm having so much fun. Like, I can remember watching this movie 10 years ago and missing almost all of the important things, not understanding how narrative works together, how themes work together, how the camera is reinforcing all of these ideas, and how all of the blocking between the characters reinforces more of those themes and those symbols. Those things were really lost on me 10 years ago. So I love being able to show you, like, this is what those things mean, because this is how we design movies. This is how we design sets and add depth to simple stories. Because it's like you said, like, this is everything about this story is so simple.
Right.
It's stated outright and almost and foreshadowed in almost everything. There aren't really any twists. But this movie is so deep. And it's one of those ones that you can go back through and watch 3 or 4 times and just get, it's like reading poetry. And I think that's what's like, this being an adaptation of Murakami, is it's a book. It's about these lines. It's about this content of thought. And so for me, it's like a 9.4.
Wow.
I am totally fine with it winning Best International Feature. I really wish it would have won Best Picture at the Oscars, because it was the only one I think that was deserving. I don't think the other ones are very good.
We've talked about this before. It's like, I think if you're going to have a movie that's nominated for Best International Film, why is it not thrown in the category of Best Picture? Like, yeah, it should
automatically.
It feels like,
yeah.
I mean, at least a portion of them, and maybe not every single one in the category, but it seems silly to me. It also seems it's very entitled that only American films are going to be Best Picture.
You know what we should do is we should just have Best Picture and then Best American Feature. And
right, I actually agree with that a lot more.
I feel like that would be like, it would be silly, because it would be like the Academy like actually being self-aware that,
which they're not.
Yeah, like, no, Hollywood is the pinnacle of filmmaking. But at the same time, I think a lot of them understand that, no, it's not. There's a reason that so many different pictures win the Cannes Film Festival and the Venice Film Festival, because it's a celebration of the world, which is a celebration of humanity. And that's why all of the international features are better than every single American picture.
I think it's akin
in the category,
yeah.
Not at all.
It's akin to calling it the World Series, even though it's just it's essentially it's North American baseball, and so to say like you're the winner of the world, even though it's so focused on like just this one league, it's akin to that for me. I actually agree with you. It should be changed to Best Picture, and it just includes the world, and then you have like Best American Picture, and that's the one that is just, you know, your American films, like things like Licorice Pizza and Belfast, and was it Coda that ended up winning? But no, I agree with that. It is frustrating to me, and it seems really making yourself very self-important by saying that, oh, the best picture has got to be American, and we'll make a separate category for these other films that are probably better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so with that, we're going to wrap this one up. Katya, thanks as always for being on. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
And Calvin, thanks for being on again. And thanks for changing my mind a bit on this.
I'm just glad that someone listened to me.
I
don't think there are very many people that would listen to my opinion. There are not very many people that I would find who have seen this movie to offer an opinion on.
Right. I'm not overjoyed that I watched it, but I did get joy out of having this conversation on it. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if people are tuning into us or not. I like being able to have these conversations with you guys. And if you can change my point of view on something or open my eyes in a way that I wasn't noticing before, I can appreciate that. So I'm glad to have this conversation over a movie that, again, I don't think I'd recommend. But with that, we're going to close out. You can find our podcast on any platform like Apple Music or Spotify. We also upload all these to YouTube. So go ahead and leave a comment. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And if you have any recommendations on films we should review in the future, go ahead and leave it in the comments. And with that, thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.